to wake up
and smell the rosin.
Yay!
Woo.
I hope you guys are doing great. To all fellow Texans, happy spring break.
Indeed.
Or if you're outside Texas and you also have a spring break, happy, congratulations, you made it. I was thinking this, and of course I saw some Facebook posts about last year around this time. We had no idea what was coming.
The coronavirus.
At least in the US. However, in Italy, it was already getting pretty bad, and it's almost symbolic because today our wonderful guest is my amazing student, Eleonora Gabutti, all the way from Acque Terme in Italy. She's going to be joining us pretty soon, and I am just so excited. Hi, Eleonora, how are you?
Hi, thank you. I'm fine. Thank
So
you.
great to see you. I'm so excited. So just a little introduction. Eleonora is what we would consider an equivalent of a high school student right now, right, in Italy, and she is a very serious music student. My violin is her major, and we met I think summer 2018 when I was teaching in Italy, in her hometown of Acque Terme. Very beautiful. Okay, Italy. Oh, don't get me started on Italy anyway, but Acque Terme is a beautiful town in Italy, northern Italy, and so there's this really wonderful festival that's been going on for quite a while. It's called Interharmony. It's organized by Misha Quint, a cellist who's based in, I think he's based in the US for sure, but he has, just like me, we share a Russian musical heritage. So he comes kind of from, he's a wonderful cellist and very, very prominent cellist in the US, but we both come from sort of Russian schools. So Misha Quint kind of contacted me a couple of years ago through email. He just sent me this invitation to the festival, and so I've been going for a couple of years. Unfortunately, last summer, of course, the face-to-face festival didn't happen, but we still had a virtual festival, and so I still was able to meet with Nora only virtually. And so we, since the first time I was in Acque Terme, or the second year, I met Nora, and we had a really great time. She played for my master class, and then we continued kind of having lessons remotely, and then the next festival. So anyway, Eleonora has, I'm not Eleonora's main teacher though. She has a wonderful teacher in Italy, and could you tell us a little bit about maybe when you started the violin? How did you start? Like, how does it work in Italy? And also, of course, let us know the name of your teacher who is teaching you right now.
Yeah, so I think I started playing the violin quite. I didn't really think of, I want to be a violinist as I grew up, but I just came into this music school, which is 5 minutes from my home, and I met my first violin teacher, and I was stunned by her playing, and I decided to pick up the violin, and I started when I was 10 years old. Now I am almost 18, and it's been quite a hard journey because at first the usual problems. I didn't want to practice but then I discovered the beauty of the violin, and I really want to try to make it a profession, or at least it takes like half of my day, I think, of playing the violin. I study, I listen to music, I practice and everything. And I need really to thank my teacher, who's called Diana Tizzani. I really appreciate all the work we're doing together, and everything she's teaching me. She's amazing. And also I need to thank my music school, the Scuola di Musica Bottino here in Acqui. And really I grew up there, and we'll see what grow up in Italian, how we say that, because it will be interesting. And yeah, I'm in the 4th year out of 5 years of what we call liceo, which is high school, and I study foreign languages. And yeah, that's it. In Italy, really, we have a quite different system, as I know you have in the US. I think you have bands in school, music hours. Well, we don't really have that. We have one like high school, which focuses on music education, but really if you want to play something and you start playing an instrument, it's because you really want to. And yeah, we don't really take it as a hobby like sports here. We really.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, that's how it was in Russia. In school, in regular schools, you were offered just like your normal, like general education, right? And it was very in depth though. So we went very, like when it came to general ed, like subjects, math, algebra, physics, it went very in depth, history, literature, all that. But yes, we didn't really have a lot of extracurricular activities in schools. So people, like children who were particularly talented and wanted to do sports, for example, they would do sports separately. Like there were special places to do sports. There were special kind of like college schools to do music if you were serious about music. There were art schools there. So it was kind of a little bit more work for the parents, right? Because then the parents had to provide this extra transportation, or in our case, the government basically subsidized all that extra education. I don't know how it is in Italy, so at least financially it wasn't difficult as it is here. What about Italy? How does it work financially?
No, here we have to pay for everything, even for breeding sometimes, because they're mainly private schools. Or, for example, we have a middle school here who does also the music classes, so it doesn't cost anything. I think just something for the instrument because they lend it. But you start there, and usually you finish there because it's really a superficial learning of the instrument. You know, they don't really go in depth. They don't really study music theory, for example, or they don't really focus just on the instrument. Maybe there's a nice aspect because they really focus on orchestra playing or ensemble playing, but they don't really go in depth with the technique. So usually kids start there and finish after 3 years. But for the rest, you really have to pay for everything. There are some, scholarships somewhere, but for example here, which is a small reality, we don't really have many opportunities to have funds, so we have to pay. Our family needs to pay for.
Wow, that's quite a commitment for the parents, and it always amazes me how music is such a complicated thing to start, and it's compounded by the fact that it's preferable that you started earlier than later, right? And so usually you would start at the age where you have no idea about things like paying and transportation when someone else has to do it for you. So definitely I have to say that I myself know that I'm so grateful to my mom who took that role upon herself when I was 7, and the same obviously with your parents, and
And my mom
yes.
also took on that role at
yes,
about 7 as well.
But of course, for me, I was already a professional musician, but I had to learn because again, in the U.S., it works very differently than it was in back where I came from Russia. So tell us a little bit about the Kabalevsky. So Kabalevsky, actually, I want to just kind of interrupt myself for a second. So Kabalevsky Concerto is actually very popular here in the U.S. among students, but usually it's the first movement that everybody plays. And so I'm so excited that you are going to play for us the second movement, and you're doing such a beautiful job. So I'm really looking forward to everyone hearing you play it. But tell us a little bit, why did you decide to go with the second movement and not first or the third, for example?
Yes, I just followed my teacher's advice. She told me, play the second. First of all, because it was at the time when I decided, just in January, it was the last, not the last one we started, but the worst one at the time. So she wanted me to be motivated to study it more through, and also because it joins many different aspects of technique or rhythmical problems. There's all those part with quintings at the end and everything. And also because I need to learn to play with the mute, because the last part has the mute on, so I need to project the sound better. There's another aspect. And also for the phrasing of the first part, which is quite difficult because I was also I learned to play with the metronome, and I didn't really have the idea of phrasing really well, and since it's for an exam and I will have to play with the piano and everything, I really need to learn also to interpret it a little bit. Yeah, that's. And the third movement also, I was thinking of that, but it's less, there are less aspects, I think, sometimes than in the second one.
Okay, wonderful. So before we're gonna switch to playing, but we had a couple of announcements.
Yes.
So number one, I want to make sure, guys, whether you're watching now or later, you're watching the replay of this. Our new schedule is we're doing live streams every other week, but because we skipped a week back, when it was a couple of weeks when we had that horrible storm and there was no electricity, no connection, so now we kind of are catching up. So next week we're going to have our next live stream, not
Yes.
2 weeks after, but next Saturday. And Esti, can you tell us about Eddie and what he's going to be doing next week?
Absolutely. So we have a really good friend, Eddie Malavi, who is a violist, and he specializes in Alexander technique with an emphasis on body mapping. So he's going to be giving a really great Alexander technique presentation next Saturday. Alexander technique it's not only for musicians, it's just a study of the way we hold ourselves in our body and the way we use our body. It's about, being ergonomical with ergonomic, I don't know.
Yeah, I think ergonomic.
I was like ergonomical. It's about being ergonomic with the way you use your body, releasing tension by, not just by relaxation, but by having a proper posture and, just it's really all about being mindful about each part of your body and where the energy is coming from. And that's so helpful in many things in life, even just like daily tasks, but especially as musicians. And my explanation is a bit here and there because I'm not a specialist. I have had some classes before at Meadowmount, and also some of my friends have, studied it. So I've really enjoyed the things I've learned about it. But it's wonderful, and there were a lot of aspects about it that even just learning the basics really changed my life and the way I play and the way I sit, the way I move my body in certain ways that I had no idea. So it's so interesting. I really, really enjoy it, and I recommend it strongly for anyone, and even your non-musicians friends. If you have people in your life who have back pain from sitting all year in front of a computer, I know I do, or anybody who, I remember one person said one coach that I had who was doing Alexander technique said they were helping like rock climbers who needed to use their bodies in the best possible way. And how,
or if you do Facebook on your phone a lot, or drink coffee, especially big coffee cups like mine, whatever you do, it's amazing. We use our bodies so much, and we repeat. It's the repetitiveness of task, right? That's what gets to us.
Yeah, so definitely, whoever you are, recommend this to your friends. Everybody should definitely come. And I just want to add that Alexander technique lessons can be pretty pricey. So the fact that we're getting this, it's going to be like a 90-minute presentation on this Alexander technique and body mapping, which is an amazing resource that is really hard to find.
Very valuable.
Yeah, very valuable information.
Plus, Eddie is a really good musician. He's a very accomplished musician. So, and it being live streamed, you guys can actually, if you have any questions, as a musician, that's, I think, the amazing thing that he really digs it.
So definitely come. It's going to be great. Same time, same place, YouTube Live at noon. Eddie is going to be screen sharing and doing some other things, so he'll be doing most of the, controlling of the Zoom. And make sure that you bring, he told me to tell you all, let me double check, because he told me to tell you all to bring, let the audience know to have a paper and pencil handy, some books for head support, and either a yoga mat or a towel to lay down on when we do floor work. And we'll also do some chair work. So quick checklist, again, paper and pencil, a yoga mat or a towel to lay on, and some books for head support, and a chair.
And we can put it in the description later too. But guys, this is so...
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So definitely attend, and we'll make a post about that on Instagram and have everybody share it. But I think that's most of the announcements. Oh, last thing, we do have one. Make sure you stick around to the end because we have a very special little presentation at the end of this video that is extremely cute.
So speaking of awesome, of course, Eleonora is gonna. We've done already live master classes, and this is going to be at first our regular master class. Eleonora is going to play beautifully, and we're going to just dig into whatever issues she would like to work. But speaking of having a real Italian with us, a native Italian speaker, that is going to be awesome. So once we're done with Kabalevsky, I'm going to pick Eleonora's brain about Italian terms that we all know and use. Particularly, it's going to be forte, piano, and crescendo. And I have to tell you, when she told me what crescendo really means in Italian, I almost fell off my chair. And you gotta stick around, make sure it's going to be so awesome. And then after that, so a little surprise that Esti was talking about, and I want to remind you, because we did talk about it before, we're starting a new rubric, and right now we're aiming for it to be a part of our live streams, is for our subscribers who maybe don't have a whole piece to play for us, or maybe it's not your thing. You don't want to be, a whole hour, playing in front of a camera or whatever. You are welcome, if you have questions, you're welcome to record a short question or a short clip of you playing, send it to us with your questions, and that's what we're going to be doing. So at the end, we have our first two little questions, but it's the cutest thing ever. Please stay tuned. You will not regret it. Okay, so let's go. So we're going to get into the second movement of Kabalevsky. Eleonora, so you're tuned? You're ready?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm going to turn off our video and audio for when she's playing, so it won't show us.
So just I want to just let our audiences know that this is a typical second movement of a concerto, that usually, classical pattern where you have Vivaldi. By the way, Italian Vivaldi started that. He canonized, if that's the right word, canonized, the traditional concerto form. The word concerto, again, it's just insane. I don't know. I'm crazy about Italy and anything Italian, especially the language. So
she is. I can vouch for
that. No, you should see how many YouTube stuff about Italy I watch all the time.
Hey Mom, what are you doing? Oh, I'm looking at real estate in Italy.
Yeah, just for kids. Not that and that's where I see a lot of piano words. We'll talk about that later. Okay. So anyway, as in the typical concerto, second movement is usually slow, and that's what Kabalevsky does. And in this case also, he does a slow, fast, slow. So he starts with this beautiful, slow melody, and then that part ends, and then the second part, pochissimo più mosso, is a little bit faster and much more whimsical, right? And it requires different technique, and it goes for a while, and then at the end he returns it back to this beautiful, singing melody. So because of that structure, I think we're thinking of doing it first. We're going to go over that beautiful slow part and work a little bit on it, and then we'll go on to the next one. So let's start.
Awesome.
All right, beautiful. Yes, Leonora, very, very beautiful. It's such a, I can tell that you're really, first of all, I love your sound. And, also I've heard a pre-recorded version of it. We always have it just in case. First of all, it's mind-boggling that you're in Italy and we're here in the US and you're playing a Russian melody that is very, ringing so true to my heart. So I think you have a very good idea of what kind of sound, it needs, the color. I would say one of the first things I would say, don't be afraid to vibrate a little more. It can definitely be, vibrato can be a little bit broader. And that's what I wanted to try at first. Can we try from the beginning and just try to relax the wrist? And remember we talked about how like the easiest way for me to change my vibrato is usually I just kind of project, like imagine a graph. And so in this case, your graph is good as far as how close they are, but I would say they could be a little bit bigger, like the fluctuations. So instead of it being like this, so imagine this is very reminiscent of Russian style singing. And I always like when I think of music, the first thing I like to think about whether is it more of a dance or is it more of a song, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, it's not that clear cut, but in this case, obviously very song, very vocal. So let's start again and just can you relax and think of vibrato being a little bit more, pronounced. And see what happens just from the beginning. I love it. Makes a huge difference. And of course, I know that you have a beautiful vibrato, but sometimes, when you start and you're a little nervous, that kind of, so this is one of the things that very beautiful. It totally made it even more vocal, even more flowing, right, Esti?
Yeah,
what do
absolutely.
you think? And but sometimes, especially, I know, Leonora, you're preparing this for a conservatory audition, right? Are you going to play? Yeah, which is exciting. So, yeah, isn't that amazing? In Italy, conservatory in Italy. And conservatory, is that Italian word? Conservatory, I don't know, probably, yeah. So, yeah, don't even get me started. Okay, so anyway.
By the way,
yeah.
Adriana's here. She says hello.
Hi, Adriana.
And she's been just commenting a little bit.
Oh,
here
awesome.
And there.
Thank you so much.
We love when you guys comment.
Yeah.
So please comment.
It's so much fun. That's why we do it live. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so going back to, what was my thought?
You're talking about vibrato and the singing.
Yeah. So this is what I would do. A little trick. When you're practicing, practice that in. So basically, because what happens, obviously you have this beautiful vibrato and it's not you know how to do it. But when you go for audition, it's kind of, you only do it once, especially by then you'll be doing a live audition, right? So a lot of times we can just forget. So this is something, for example, when it comes to the beginning of something, so of course, you're going to practice in the intonation, right? You're going to practice in your phrasing. You're going to practice, but that also, you could practice everything in. So basically what I would do, I would set aside maybe half hour and say, well, I'm just going to practice my mindset before I start playing. So I remember, it's because it's not about learning how to do it, obviously, but it's like teaching your brain to remember, right?
Absolutely. And, when you're talking about practicing how you're going to start or how you're going to, begin something, that's so important. That's one thing that I learned a lot about in graduate school, actually, because I was rethinking a lot of how I approach the instrument and how I project what I want to say musically. And I think that was one thing I never really thought to practice, because I was like, oh, well, I practice starting in the practice room every time I play, but not really. You're just playing. But it's like you have to practice how you're going to breathe, how you're going to sit, and how you're going to start. And also, I've been teaching some beginners this year, and, it's something that you have to teach them as well. Especially, I have a student who's playing one of his first, performances this coming week, and he's playing just a couple of little pieces out of Suzuki Book 1, and he's doing great. But I was like, okay, before you start, make sure your feet are grounded on the floor. Like for cello, you need to have the feet flat, so, you're not on your toes, or, And I told them too, make sure they give you a chair that your feet touch the floor, because with kids sometimes they're short. He's a pretty tall kid, but I was like, you know, make sure your feet touch the floor when you have the chair. Make sure you take some deep breaths. And these are all things that eventually, you know, we start to do on our own, but you have to think about them. And then once you get past those basic things, there's more things like, okay, I want to practice exactly how I want to start. So like, how's my vibrato? Is it going to be starting before the note?
Yeah.
Is it going to start as soon as I play it? Am I starting without vibrato? How am I going to
On
breathe?
the exhale.
Right. Like, am I going to start on the exhale?
You know,
like what feels good. Like, am I
exactly.
taking a quick short breath?
Yeah.
Or like, just like a conductor would practice how he's going to cue the orchestra in, you have to practice how you're going to cue yourself in when you play.
And obviously, Eleonora, you know this piece and you still have time to get it even better. But what it does, practicing mindset, so imagine when you're doing it in the practice room and you're repeating that behavior over and over again, we feel much more comfortable in the practice room, right? So if you are teaching yourself to always be mindful and start with that, guess what happens when you are playing somewhere in a more stressful situation, potentially, hopefully not, but potentially, right? But you are so used to taking these mental steps before, guess what? Your body immediately, it forgets it's in a stressful situation. It sort of immediately almost what is the word I'm trying to, it psychologically almost transitions you back to your practice room where you're super comfortable. So those kind of things I highly recommend at your level where you're doing a beautiful job with this movement already. I think this is what will make a huge difference. Now another thing I wanted to say in this particular, we're going to go to but in this particular slower part, what is your main goal that you feel like you still are working toward?
Yes, I'm from the technical side. I'm still working on the octave because sometimes they're not perfect, and from the goal side, I think on the whole, I'm working on the phrasing of the piece, knowing where the phrase ends, where a sentence and the answer and everything. I think this, and sometimes it is quite difficult to maintain the sound playing higher on the D string and still thinking of, okay, it's the right note, I'm playing the vibrato and everything, and sometimes I miss the phrase. That's I think the big
Right,
part.
those are very artistic goals. And of course, so again, it starts, hey, Esther, can you help me to share this real quick? Because I want you guys to see, it's a ridiculous key. It's a B flat minor. Thank you very much, Kabalevsky. So let's see.
Wait,
I think.
I'm working on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to put it up for you guys there. Yeah. Okay. So look at this. This is, I hate that. All these flats. So again, I just wanted you to appreciate how well Eleonora is doing what she's doing. I bet you didn't even realize that. And also look at, if you look, let me grab my trusty. So if you look right here, you see it's Sul D. That means you're playing on D string, right? And that's what Eleonora was talking about. And look, it's going all the way here. So you have all these kind of higher notes, right? In shifts. And so, so that's a really great, and right off the bat, right at the beginning. So obviously you will probably have accompaniment maybe when you're performing, so that will make it a little bit easier, but still. So one of the things that I would kind of fool myself, and let's see if I can even do that. Yeah, so F to D flat, right? Obviously that's the correct way to spell this interval because we're in the B flat minor. But if it really freaks you out, you can just think where the C sharp is in the third position. Sometimes if you're really, really nervous, that can make it a little bit not so scary, right? As far as the sound, I really like your overall sound. I think you could probably make more of a peaks, right? And so in that case, remind me, do you start down or up?
I start down.
Yeah, can you?
On the
Yeah,
first.
so here is a great trick. And I'm not saying, so we're not going to change your bowings, but I love to practice. For example, this is the hardest thing for me. When I start a phrase like this, my first instinct is to lean in the first note. So kind of think 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So it's almost the most energy, I tend to give the most energy to the first note, right? Well, usually with phrasing, it's not like that, because if you think it's like talking. Usually when you start a sentence, you don't always start with the most important word, right? A lot of times you set up the sentence so that, or a thought with a few sentences, and then the most important part a lot of times comes later, right? So most of the time we tend to build up to the meat, right? To the punchline, or what is it called, right? So to help, but for violinists, it's difficult for all of us who use bows, right? In the violin instrument family, or any other instruments that use bows and strings, because naturally when we start down bow, we tend to be a little bit more leaning into it, and then the bow naturally lightens up to the end, right? So in order to help myself to hear this phrasing without these limitations, this is what I like to do. I would start up bow and see what happens. Did you hear how much easier? So, and not that I'm not saying that you should do that, but I think that really shows me, wait a minute, F is not really the end of everything. It's only the beginning. And technically, if we, so this is kind of a little crazy way to think about it. But if you thought of a phrase as a measure, so for example, and each measure as a beat. So we'll do, suppose this phrase will say, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So, and now we're going to think about this as a measure. If it were one measure and you had beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this way, so we call it big 4 sometimes. They call it like the big 4, meaning that now instead of beats you think as a measure, and each measure becomes as a beat in a larger phrase of 8 measures, right? Mm-hmm. So in this case, I think the beat 2, so let me see, I'll take it. Yeah, so this will be great. I think this beat 2 and beat 3, to me, I feel if I drive the first beat to the second and then the third to the fourth, I think I get it a little more dynamic phrase, right? Not that there's so many different ways to do it. Yeah. It doesn't, but it gives me some kind of a start. So then when I reverse, and the reason I did it reversing my bows, because if I want to do it the most natural way, if I just start a bow, my bow will do it naturally. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to fight that uphill battle. So at first, again, that's what, so if you start backwards, basically you naturally will phrase. And doesn't it make sense more than, I mean, this makes sense too, I'm not saying, but it's, right off the bat, it's a little easier to keep the phrase going. You don't have to worry about dying, static phrasing, right? Obviously, you can do it many ways. So
that's one of the,
go ahead.
That's one of the parts that's, I think, most difficult about these slower movements. It's because you have to find a way to keep that slow, steady energy while not dying away. And you were mentioning, keeping up the sound. You have to, I think I've had it described to me as trying to ride a bike in slow motion. You don't, it's hard. And I think, in many ways, playing faster is easier. But so doing things like this, where you're strategically planning your bows, anything you can do to help you keep the phrase going is going to be useful.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing it up. I totally agree that a great illustration that trying to ride the bike slowly is more difficult to keep that momentum going, right? Mm-hmm. And so here, again, so this is the trick. Now, I'm not saying, of course, I mean, you can choose to use these bones, but what I'm saying, it's not for the necessarily for the purpose of changing the bowing, because obviously you should be able to do that either way. But it's just sometimes if you reverse the bowing, a lot of times naturally right away you reverse your focus and you realize it's, for example, this is like this classic, you know, Waltz Scherzo by Tchaikovsky, you know. You know that one? So there's a middle part. That part. And for years, I just could not phrase, it never felt right, the phrasing. Like I never liked the way I phrased it. I felt like it was so static. And then one day, I remember I heard Leonid Kogan playing, and it was one of those things that you didn't see the picture. And then the way he phrased it, I thought, wait a minute, it sounds almost like he's starting up bow, because he did. So his phrasing sounded not necessarily that he started up bow, but his phrasing sounded that exactly he was thinking of beat the first measure of the phrase leading to the second. And so that's when I thought, well, I'm going to try it up bow and see, and it worked. Then I reversed it back to the regular bones, but from then on, I never had trouble phrasing that little part, right? And so here it is. So let's do this. How about we try reversing the bowings, just for now. I'm not saying, so you can feel, so it's a little bit more natural way, and see if you like the way it phrases, like this.
Okay.
How do you feel? What?
It sounds different. It actually gives, yeah, movement to the sentence actually. Yeah.
Right? It's a little bit easier to propel this. And now I'm not saying this is because there's so many different ways.
To start the phrase also.
Yeah. So again, so now let's see. So that little natural crescendo that you get right off the bat. So now when you're starting, maybe as you're starting down bow, think of how it was. So you get on the down bow, if you want to do the same, you know, effect, you're just going to start a little bit slower, a little bit lighter. So you're going to drive, let's try it now. So the trick is drive the phrase into the second measure, right? So don't give everything you've got to the first sound. And very often I do that because I want to make sure, because the first sound is something that you can actually prepare for, right? And then you don't have that luxury anymore, I think. And that's why we mentally are invested sometimes in the very first sound. So in this case, think of starting with the most beautiful sound you can, but remember, this is only like an inhale. So you're preparing for an exhale on the second measure, and now see if you can do that from starting down like normally and up, right? Let's see. And remember the vibrato. Keep the vibrato that nice like you did, you know, not so much like this, but more like this. Yeah. So here are a couple of things. The second part works really well because it leads naturally into D flat. The first one, I would still, I think, do a little bit more crescendo toward the D. So toward the B flat. So think of this. Let's think it this way. And again, it's just a suggestion. This is what I would think. Okay, I'm going to erase this mess right now here. Okay, so this is piano and dolce. Oh my goodness. Okay, so what we're going to do, what if I'm going to actually go back. What if we made it into double P, double pianissimo, and then we made a little bit of a crescendo and made this into mezzo piano, and then went right back. So visually, does that make a little more sense? So how do we do it? Obviously, if we're starting on the up bow, that will happen naturally. So to mimic that on the down bow, since you're going to start, and probably not start from the very frog, right? Start where it slide. So one of the tricks of starting down bow on piano without shaking is make sure that you're actually providing support, so you're feeling support of your arm all the way here, right? That's why standing up is always much better than sitting down. I always tell my students. So
not for
like,
me.
Yes, yeah, not for, yeah, sorry, yeah, you're right. But if you're standing, don't lock your knees and all that. If you're really standing, really more or less naturally, you will feel that when you do this, you'll feel your back muscles, right? And so what you want to actually, not to forget that you're holding up the whole arm weight, not just your bow. The bow is the thing on top of your arm. So number one, you want to kind of hold your arm with your body, support your arm weight with your body, so you have complete control of that. And then also hug the bow sort of like this. So instead of pinching it like this, it always helps to hug it. That way, you see, even if you want to, now this is, I'm not pinching it, I'm just balancing it, so I don't even have to, it kind of stays in my, kind of like when you pick up a purse like this, it's the same idea, but, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, of course, but in a way, this, if your fingers are flexible and they're bendy, that helps you to, from getting stiff, but at the same time balancing that weight, right? So every finger here has to be alive. Your thumb, pinky has to be on top because it's leveraging all that weight, right? But the other fingers can help from the bottom a little bit too. So you want to support your bow very well. You want to support your arm weight very well. You want to breathe. I would definitely, when it starts so soft, I would prefer to start after the exhale, right? Not, you don't want to do that because it's going to make it worse, right? So when you exhale, so you inhale, you see your violin doesn't shake. What I
also,
see,
like starting from motion.
yeah,
Not starting from.
yeah. So there's so many. One of the things about breath, like sometimes I want to do. You see, if you're breathing as you're starting to play, your violin is going to move, right? Because it's right on our chest.
That's
so,
interesting.
So that's, yeah, that's really, that's a huge thing that can mess up, especially in a nervous situation, because there's no, if I'm going to go, look what happens. Like it literally goes away from my bow. So that's why when it's something as sensitive as beginning this movement on the piano, and I want to make sure, I want to have a slow bow and show off and not to shake and all those things. Definitely, again, as you're preparing, mindfully training for the beginning, I would definitely find, I mean, everybody's different. For me, what works really to see, and then my violin is very steady. So let's try. Now, I'm going to stop hogging the camera and let's see if you can work those unworked things real quickly.
I'm going to stop the share so we can see her better. But I can restart it. Just let me know.
I loved it. That was beautiful.
That was really nice.
Okay. Now, one little thing, and I'm being very picky, and of course, because right now you're not playing with accompaniment. So one of the things that I've noticed that's happening toward the third and fourth measure of the phrase, because the first and second measure, you have 4 beats on each bow, right? You notice in the third measure, you have 2 beats on each bow. So, however, and I totally agree, you're using your whole bow, which is good because that should give you even more crescendo, right? And more development. However, you are instinctively slowing down. So you're actually taking, and so that negates your opportunity to build up the energy, right? So a lot of times I see that, and I do that myself. So what is important, I would really turn on the metronome, not to be metronomical, but to see, like Esti, can you clap for me as a metronome? 1, 2. So look what happens with the bow distribution. So here's 4 beats. metronome. So my metronome. Okay, so what happens, you see, when you are aware, and if you don't allow yourself to slow down, you can switch all of a sudden into a lighter and faster bow mode, and boom, all of a sudden you have that extra energy that you basically don't work for. You want to try that? You'll have to, if you have a metronome, you can turn it on, or you can just try to avoid slow, because what happens, the second measure slows down because you're increasing the amount of bow you're using, but you're sort of staying with the same bow speed. So if we do both, that might be even more fun. Let's try that. Yeah. How does that feel?
Better actually. I need to balance the whole bow and the speed. Yeah.
So a couple of now, it doesn't mean that you don't necessarily have to use the whole bow. I just wanted you to feel that, again, there's another way to right off the bat to show off all those different colors. So in this case, for example, if I want to use all of the bow, I will probably move a little bit away from the bridge, and I will lighten the weight, and then it'll give me, so it's not, because if I stay, so it's give and take. But talking about the nuances and the different colors and phrasing, this is something that is really could be amazing. You could find so many different colors. So in fact, let's try. So I want to move a little bit. Well, let's do this phrase again, all the way up to the 1, and I want you to just deliberately experiment with in some places, in some notes and bows, to be closer to the bridge and a little bit more weighty. In some, try to where you feel like you want to change color. What if you went a little bit more tasto and a little bit lighter and faster bow, and just see. Just for fun, just play around with colors and see if we can hear the difference. Yes, I definitely heard, let's see, so in measure 5, I heard right away there was a change of color. It was lighter, it was a little bit lighter sound, it was a little bit like darkened sense of muted, and then you made a really big crescendo toward da 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 right there. Is that what you were?
Yeah.
Because I definitely heard a very big, so that was really good. So this is kind of the ways, basically, when it comes to, of course, there's also vibrato that you can change. And, in some musical styles, you don't really rely so much on vibrato, like in classical style and Baroque. But in this style, you can totally change it around. So you could start with a little bit more reserved style, for example, and then get more like this. Or you could keep this the same, but you could spread them out and make them wider and thinner, or you could, so there's so many ways you could add to that. But that definitely, even over Skype, which I know mics are not so good, but I heard a really different, very distinctive, different color, and not just dynamic. What do you think?
Yeah, and the core of the sound is always found in the bow. Like, the voice is the bow, and the vibrato is there to help that voice along. I think for me, sometimes when I'm playing stuff of this nature, it's hard to, I forget that sometimes, and then I get too obsessed. I get so obsessed with what I'm doing in the left hand that I realize my bow is just not, barely moving, or just not, I'm not paying enough attention. And usually, once I've decided what kind of vibrato I want, and then once I pay attention to the right hand again and have it moving, then everything just seems to fall into place more. So yeah, definitely experiment with different kinds, and same with the bow. You know, you don't always have to use the whole bow. You don't always have to use the same parts of the bow. You can experiment with where you are in the bow and like what kind of sound you want and where you need to be to get that sound. All these really great things you can do to just experiment and play around with it. Because that's the great part about a movement like this. You have the time. You have the time to explore all these expressive options.
So I want to go a little bit into the octaves. I want to just give you a really quick way that I know octaves are always, by the way, you're doing a great job. So can you, so before 3 where you have that, can we share the screen?
Yeah, I have to press it here first.
Okay.
From the F with the trail 2 bars before 3.
Maybe like 2 measures before 3. If we could let me share the screen so we can, our listeners can actually.
Now it should
see.
show on your.
Wait a second. We can just leave it like that, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so here is, so I would like to see from, if you start from here, from the trill right here, because I want to see what fingerings you're using to get up to the octaves, right? And then we can see like what we can do to get it like super reliable. Are you there? I think we lost. Did we lose? Oh, did we lose you?
Yeah, sorry, the connection was gone for a second. I'm sorry.
It's okay, you're back. Yay!
Oh, she's back. Okay.
The joys of internet. Okay, so let's do from the trill because I want to see your fingerings, and then we'll talk about the octaves. Oops, I can't hear.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Are you muted?
The audio one, I'm sorry.
It's okay, no worries. It's good that it's just a mute, nothing more serious. Good. That was really good. Okay, so since you're not playing, you're doing right. So, am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important. So what the way I would practice it, I would go. So I would kind of change it into double stops. So maybe like this. You want to try it like this? Broken octaves? Let's try it. Yeah, so this way you can hear exactly where the problems are. So the next thing, I would go ahead and mark, because, okay, this is kind of a frustrating thing that I discovered about intonation, and I say it every time, but it's also a blessing in disguise. Because for a long time, I was terrified, deathly terrified of playing out of tune on stage when I'm nervous. And of course, it only made things worse. And the reason I was terrified was my understanding of intonation was always, it's like throwing darts in the dark. I mean, how can I possibly ever know exactly for every note where the fingers go, right? Like, and so to me, every time I played something out of tune, I kind of considered it a complete, what is that called? Like a chance, right? Like a
gamble, kind of.
Yeah. Well, what's the word? There's no law to it.
There's no rhyme or reason.
Yeah, well, I forget. It's randomness. Yeah.
Oh.
So I always felt like it's just random because I know very well I can play that note in tune bajillion times, and it just randomly somewhere I know I'm eventually going to play it out of tune sometime, but it's so random because I don't know when, I don't know where, and I don't know whether it's going to be sharp or flat. So that really scared me, and I think it's a lot of us I think feel like that about intonation, right? But then later on, much later than I wish it did, I realized that that's actually not the case, believe it or not, but our intonation inconsistencies are extremely consistent. And so that I realized that the more I started recording and having opportunities to listen back to my recorded performances, I would realize, I would hear that same note being out of tune every time, exactly the same way. And so the next step, what I would do, this kind of, when you're playing broken octaves where you actually play them together, then it's very easy for you to note where you tend to be out of tune. Now, there's always some randomness in life, right? But I think it's like very high percentage what I do. So I would record that, listen back to myself, or like you just played, I would mark which notes were out of tune and whether they need to be higher or lower. And then next time I would deliberately do that. And it's amazing how quickly I could fix it. Now, I'm not saying, of course, there's always some randomness to everything, to performance. But this, I have to tell you, once I started working, I kind of started thinking of this concept when it came to intonation accuracy rather than this darts in the dark kind of mentality. I do have to say my intonation improved greatly and quickly, but also I feel so much more confident. And because of that, I think overall during my performances, my intonation accuracy improved greatly because it started making sense to me, right? So that's what I would do. I would do the same on the higher octaves, practice like this. And it's once you feel like you really got it, I highly recommend that you would start like 2 measures before 3 and go to the key change, to the whole, record yourself and then listen back and see if you're really playing in tune. Because sometimes when you're playing, you can't. And then if it's great, then I would go and record myself like 10 times in a row, that part, and see if I could nail it, or maybe 5 times in a row. And then if you do, that will give you so much confidence, and that confidence alone will prevent you sometimes from messing up. But if you find something that's not quite, then you go, you work, and then you do the same process. Good?
Okay, yeah.
Awesome. So now I'm going to scroll it up a little bit. Now, as you can see, pochissimo piumoso, where thankfully we have a key change there. And so I love this part because it sounds a lot kind of like Prokofiev-like, right? It's very whimsical. So let's start there, and let's see, maybe go from here. We're gonna keep going all the way to tempo primo, maybe? Like yeah, let's do that. It's a really cute part. I love that. Beautiful job. And by the way, speaking of colors, you're doing such a great job changing like that dreamy kind of color. It's beautiful. So what I would say, don't be afraid to use that color in the context of the slower movement too. And you see how here you can like naturally your bow speed goes faster, right? And you're lightening up. So that's what I was saying. In places where you have divided bows, where you have less beats per bow, even in a slow movement, you can kind of utilize that effect and go like dreamy a sound, right? A little faster, a little lighter. But that was really beautiful. Now, one quick thing, and I could be wrong. So in this measure right here, this sounded a little bit sharp. It sounded almost, just be careful, right? Because it looks like it should be a D sharp. Yeah, and I'm being super picky. It was really nice. I would say I really love what you're doing here. One thing that I would not be of this, I love that you're doing a crescendo. I would say poco sostenuto. You could do more, and you could. I would, as far articulation, I feel here you could definitely do a different articulation than here, for example, right? So it could be a little more connected and more meaty. Like more meaty in the sound, right? And I know it says a tempo, so I don't know that piece at all, but this is really nice. That's really nice because it's very like snappy, right? Once you get here to I would say it's almost like imagine if this part were played by woodwinds, like this part, for example, right? Like if a woodwind section played it. And here, all of a sudden, you go to really luscious string section. See the difference? So I would really just have warmer sound, not be afraid to have warmer sound, and maybe more connected, not be, since now you're playing the repeated notes with separate bows, you can actually sustain it, right? So that's the only thing. You want to try that?
Yeah.
So let's go maybe, is this a good spot for you, like right here? I like that. And then back, you can go, but yeah, I like that. And I would use as much vibrato as possible, of course. And I don't, of course, it is harder to be more rhythmical. So make sure and try to keep the rhythm aspect as much as possible. But that richness of sound, warmth, it really makes sense to me there. It's and also it makes it more dynamic because it shows. So you're not just relying on being louder and in a higher register, but you add like a whole another dimension to that climax of.
You're adding rhythmic diction.
Yeah, very good.
So rhythmic diction here is really important. So the way you're speaking the rhythms with your bow and with your left hand, and that adds that whole. It helps add that dimension of character.
Yeah, very nice. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So, and of course, these are like, we're being very picky because you sound. Now, I love the number 9, the tempo primo section right there. And you play it so well. Can we go from there? And then basically that's the end. So we're going to start tempo primo. And as you guys can see, it goes in number 10, here rehearsal 10. It goes back little by little. It transitions back into the original character, and then in rehearsal 11 we go and he recaps basically the opening theme, and it sort of becomes that ABA section, right? Like kind of 3-part. So can we do that? Let's start from tempo primo and just play to the end.
Okay, should I use the mute?
Yes, please, absolutely. If you were intending to, that would be wonderful. Con sordino. Sorry, I have to say it. Very nice. Beautiful job. And great job with those double stops. Those are horrible. Those are like really difficult double stops. And they sound good. So, you know what? It reminds me a lot of, Prokofiev first violin concerto, the end of the first movement where he gives those scales. Da 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 da. It reminds so it reminds me a lot. I really like what you're doing here. I think there in 10. Do you have a G nat? Because maybe we have different editions, but I think the trill. Just make sure the trill is G flat because it sounded like G natural.
Yes, I got it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. So also a little careful because I know with all the flats, it's easy to slide down. So one of the tricks that I do here, and of course that is not going to be the case when you have accompaniment, right? Because you're going to hear when you play by yourself. So right here, I would just think of it as a B natural, and C sharp. And so one of the ways I would maybe even play it with the second finger, because this is something like, just do me a favor, just put a B natural in the third position and play it like without even trying. Your hand really knows where it is. So I would definitely maybe make a trick, like for myself, I would probably do this, and I would pretend that this is, I would see it as a B natural. Oh my God, B natural, and with the C sharp trill. This way, even if I ended up somewhere else before, I know for sure. And then you can go to again, even if you have to, I know usually my teachers tell me, don't shift the same with the same finger 3 times or more than 2 times. But with the trills, actually it's fine. You could, if you're playing continuous trills, technically you're allowed to do whatever you want as long as, so here, whatever you do, and so here, number 1, you will always find this trill. I think even if you are worried and stressed out of your mind, I think your finger will, but then when you go down, also you just played that C flat, which is a B nat. So for your trill also you can make sure that you're matching your C flat in the trill to the B natural you just played before, right? And then just make sure to build the whole step down out of this. And this the highest trill, which actually is, you see, that's what I was saying, like I would spell this the same way as they spelled this top one, right? It's the same basically thing, right? And here I would actually practice with a harmonic. No one will even know that you're playing that B natural as a harmonic. And if you guys have seen my, I'm crazy about harmonics. I always use those. And those are actually very helpful in intonation. So in place like this, suppose something happened and you lost your way. You have no idea. But if you go for a B natural harmonic, you will find it, because if you're somewhere else, it just won't sound. So you can, so either you will hit it right away and you'll know that you're in the right place, or you will realize you were maybe a little too sharp or a little too flat, and you will find your way. So that would be like my little insurance policy here as far as intonation concerned. So number 1, again, this, I would think of it in terms, and these two. So these 2 trills, first of all, I would think of this one the same way as this one. No, B natural, C sharp. Because that, but then when I get to this one, I will practice it as a harmonic, always getting to harmonic. And then once you start trilling, it doesn't matter. So that would be kind of my insurance policy here. And here's another one. Again, here too. No one will really know. Like, it's, if you are not making it too obvious. You can really nicely play it light enough where it's not going to be like annoyingly harmonic. That E. Right, and that way you avoid, so that's another one. So little insurance policies, those purple ones, for me, just in case. And yeah, other than that, it was really, really nice. I like, you did, like, your thirds were really, really in tune, very nice, and I feel like you're thinking your major thirds, your minor thirds, and that's making a difference. So when Eleonora played it for me before, we worked on the thirds, and so my number one go-to rule about the thirds, if they're out of tune and you're not sure why, always be aware which ones are major and which ones are minor. And if you just drop your fingers naturally, a major third would have to be your fingers. You'd have to squeeze your fingers a little closer together for the major third, and you have to stretch your fingers apart a little bit for minor third. Like usually that's you're coming from the natural position. So a lot of times that helps. So that was really good. I would say though, try not to be afraid of the last note, because I felt like you were like, oh, good, I got it, and let's go. So maybe if we just when you go. Right, so keep it going. So keep your fingers down and don't run away. You already got it. So kind of, can we try that? So here, or whatever you do, whatever fingers and bowings you're doing. But can you just deliberately stay really long right now and taper that last note for me? Yes. So of course this is too long, but when you're playing that phrase, I think, so again, when you're practicing mindfulness again about your bow, not just, I know double stops, it's scary and so forth, but the shame is that when you do it really well technically, but you're forgetting that most important musical part, then it's kind of wasted, right? All that technique is wasted. And it reminds me of what David Oistrakh said when he was asked, what do you do before you play a concert? How do you like fight that stress or urge to be worried or nervous? And he said, number one, what I recommend to all my students, and I do myself, I don't think of technique as much. I concentrate more on my musical tasks, right? And so when you get here, maybe that's the only thing about the thirds. And I think the ending was really beautiful. I love your harmonic. I would say save the bow and play it as long as possible. So any questions? Any other questions here?
Out of this part, you solved the problem of the trills. I think that was the most terrifying thing. And did you hear the difference of the colors with the mute, which is difficult?
Yes.
Okay.
I really like that.
Another thing, there was the character thing, and the other, the trills were the worst part, and then on the thirds we worked on the major and minor thirds. That was the main thing I need to focus on. And the last harmonic sometimes scares me a bit, because
you know what, you can always
take as many bows as you want.
You can do two bows. Yeah. If you feel like it, no one is gonna judge you on that. One very important thing, speaking of mutes, actually, and I don't know, you might know it already, but I just want to say it, intonation is affected by mute. When you put on the mute, it does change the intonation ever so slightly. So I would say I love the way the mute sounds there. So, but you have to decide for yourself whether you're going to use the mute on your audition or wherever you're performing this or not. And if you decide to use it, then always practice with mute this part, because of intonation. And don't assume, if you're playing exact same melody with the mute, don't assume that the intonation is already solved, because it's usually, like, if you really, really carefully listen to yourself, it's weird. I don't know if it's really the intonation changes or the way I hear myself, but I find that I have to do things a little bit differently in my left hand when I play with mute. Always. Is it the same, Angel? Do you ever find that?
Sometimes I think, but I do understand what you're saying about the intonation. It does,
like
it
the
is
final,
it resonates differently.
Right. So the final product, if we think of, is slightly different. It's weird. It's like, so I would, and that could be the
it
case.
Does, it dampens some of the
overtones. Yeah.
So it affects, how you're hearing it, and even like lately, I've been doing a lot of recording projects, and even I was talking to my mom. Even having one earphone in my ear affects the way I hear my intonation and like the overtones, because I'm so used to hearing, completely unobstructed. So it's really interesting. So definitely, practice that. And, I think the most important part in that case is mapping, like Dr. Seitz was talking about, finding those places where you have those landmarks. Places where it's like a map. You're mapping things out for yourself, so you know exactly where to go, even if you're playing with a mute and it feels funny, but your muscles have been trained to go there. And then at that point, you can let go of the worry and just trust that your body's going to do what you trained it to do.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think you're right. You nailed it. I think it's not that. I think if you press the string in the same place, it gives you the same pitch, but because you hear it differently with a mute, I think we tend to start, maybe we hear it a little flatter or sharper, so we start adjusting the left hand to a wrong place. You know what I'm saying? So I would use drones. Like if you have an accompaniment, maybe pre-chord accompaniment, if you know exactly their A, you could play that, would be phenomenal, or you have someone who will play along with you on the piano, you can tune. But other than that, you can use drones, like any drones, just turn on that, like a B flat or whatever. It's a little harder because sometimes you have to change them, but at least like a common tone that would work. And then as you're playing with mute, make sure that you have kind of that, it's like a plumb line that, because that I know in my own experience, intonation can get funky when you play with mute if you're not used to. That was really good. Well, beautiful job. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for introducing this piece to me. I really never taught it before. I haven't heard it that much. So that was, and I'm glad that our subscribers have a chance to hear it. And I wanted to talk to us a little bit about the most common terms that we hear. Like, for example, the word piano. Like, I was looking, well, a girl can dream, right? I was looking at these people on YouTube there right now, a lot of people who are saying, oh, there's like a €1 house you can buy in Italy and things like that. So it's just a fun thing to watch. And so, of course, they would show you these house plans. And I would see the word piano in the, like what is it called? The map, if you buy an apartment and what is it called? They give you the plan, the architectural, the blueprint. Yeah, I'm like, why piano? So talk to us a little bit. What does piano really mean in Italian?
Okay, it means so many things. We can spend hours talking about piano, actually. The one you mentioned it because it means also level. So when, for example, if you think of a plane, in Italian we say pianura, for example, and it derives from piano because it's a level. And also I think that when you asked me about it, I thought of my teacher instantly, because when I was like 11 or 12, I asked. I'm saying the sentence in Italian and then I'm translating it because since we use the same word in two different contexts, in English it's not really translatable, my misunderstanding of the word. I asked, posso suonarlo più piano, which means I wanted to play it slower, because piano means slow too. And she was like, no, in this context you need to say, voglio suonarlo più lentamente. So I want to play it slower because lento, it's like largo. That's the same. And I remember, so if she's watching this part, thank you for everything, because I was like stubborn with this, because I didn't really understand the difference. I was just the second year, I think, and I was still in this not musical mindset. Also, yeah, for example, if you have a cake with more layers, we call that piano, the first layer. So if we have a
Layer-
3-layer cake, we have a torta tre piani. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's also
More opportunities to use.
we love cooking, so we really love kitchen and everything. So we are like,
That is so.
yeah.
Piano basically is more has to do more with like level, like moderate sort of like be plain, like don't be too big, too much, like sort of like less in a way, like more plain, more straight, simpler, almost, right? But is that would you that? So
Yeah.
what about forte? Like
forte is closer, I think, to the English meaning. Because it means strong, actually. If you translate it literally, if you think of una persona forte is a strong person. So you think of the power of the sound. It was really the images in Italian, really translating them into the common speech. I think helps understanding how the melody goes. Because if I think of a piano, I think of not just of a soft thing, but of a plain thing. And if I think of forte, I think not just of a loud thing, but of a strong sound, keeping the sound and everything. Yeah, it doesn't really have other many meanings. If I in this moment I can
power, maybe forza, like power, strength.
yeah, the power, the strength of something. That's I think the two huge meanings of that. And yeah, it's not really. I think sometimes translating like loud and soft, they lose something.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
That's why I totally agree that it's so beyond of just because technically, like I don't know if you've ever done this, but I did like on purpose. I would listen to some of my favorite violinists' recordings, and I would deliberately listen to the range of dynamics, and it's so small. I mean, you can't really on the violin. You can't really be so much louder and so much softer. It's a small instrument. Most of our instruments, you know, we don't play trombone, for example. You know, so technically, it's not really. There's not that much difference that we can make just in terms of volume. So
it's really subjective.
Yeah.
Depending on like the section, like if you have a sforzando and a forte section versus a sforzando and a piano section, you're gonna play them differently. And then like you set the range of what that means to you, and it doesn't always have to mean volume. It could mean like a color. And yeah, I think I agree that's where we kind of lose that in English, because sometimes we just say, okay, it's loud and soft. But even when you were saying level, I was thinking of level as in like a different level of like character, a different level of like sound, you know, even you know, there's all of these different ways to think about it when you know the real true meaning from the language. And there's even things that, you know, maybe aren't super translatable, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, but I think it just reminds us why music even started. It's all about the soul. It's all about it's all about the humanity that we have. That's all. You know, we're trying to express any art. It's an expression of humanity, and unfortunately, or maybe it's a good thing, our art is so difficult to get. For us, it's difficult to master the technique to the point where we can even think about art, right? And so I feel like when you start thinking right off the bat about terms like that they actually came from a language, from human beings who were trying to express something, you know, beyond just loud. So it's amazing. So now the last one, tell us what actually crescendo means.
Okay. Since I study languages, I sometimes start from the grammar part. Crescendo comes from the verb crescere, and it's the gerundio form in Italian. I don't really know how to translate it. It's like when you use, for example, present continuous. It's a continuous part, the ing form, you know. And I'll give you an example. In Italian, at the beginning, I thanked la scuola dove sono cresciuta, the school where I grew up, because crescere means to grow up. So it's not just being louder or the diminuendo softer. It's like really seeing the sound growing, like a plant or like a kid.
Like a child. And you were saying, actually, when you're talking about the child growing, you use the word crescendo, right?
That's so
It just like, it blows me away. It's amazing. amazing. It totally changes, you know, when you think of it.
Birth of the sound that's growing from when you play the note.
Yeah, it's just really, oh my goodness, that was really cool. So wonderful. So what about diminuendo? Is it, does it have any uses?
In Italian, I was thinking, it really, it's so similar to the musical term that it's different from crescendo, because crescendo we use it in many different meanings, but diminuendo, I think it stays a little bit the same. It's like it comes from meno, which is minus, like in the operation, in the plus and minus, etc. So yeah.
All right. Well,
awesome.
That's amazing. Thank you so much,
yes,
Nora. So much. You are welcome to stay with us. We have a couple of. Well, first of all, I want to thank your teacher. If she is here or if she's watching it later, please tell her thank you from me. I don't speak Italian, but you can translate. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to be working with you. It's just very exciting for me to see how music, you know, can connect us in so many ways, geographically and language-wise and time-wise. So please stay with us if you would like. If you need to leave, of course, I understand.
Or just turn off maybe the camera and the microphone. So
yeah, sure thing.
But so guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I'm just enjoying this tremendously. So our next new rubric that we're introducing today, and boy do we have the cutest thing to show you. So I have I've told a lot of our subscribers, and so this is actually a family that's very, very dear to my heart that you're going to see right now, and they sent us a couple of videos with their questions. So here is the first one.
Well, you can keep talking if you want
to. So Lucia is a very good friend. Lucia and Martina, they're mom and daughter that are very good friends of our family, and so Lucia started studying piano a couple of years ago, and so she decided to when I mentioned that, she wanted to send this, so she's playing for us a little piece that she's introducing, and she has a question that we're gonna answer after she plays.
Awesome. Let me just make sure I'm sharing sound. Okay.
Oops. Oh, what happened? We accidentally. Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
All right.
I'm gonna play Zoom Zoom by Nancy Fabre for you, Diana. No. What song am I going to start first?
What does that mean? What song are you going to start first? You mean, what's the first song you're going to play when you play violin?
Yes.
All right, that's a great question. Okay, so first of all, Lucia, I want to tell you that we really enjoyed your performance, and you're doing so many great things. You are playing double stops. We could hear your dynamics, and you are doing a lot of different ranges. What I really liked, I liked that I've heard that you were actually singing along as you were playing, and you were right on pitch. So that's wonderful. Now, the question. So what happened? Lucia and Martina are very good friends of ours, and we long time ago when she was very very young, her mom Martina asked me when if she really wanted always to play violin since she was very, very little, and so I suggested that if they could actually, if she could start piano first, so by the time she starts learning violin, if she knows, she can read music, if she understands how tonal system works, if she understands the keyboard, and I mentioned that it's just so much easier than to dive into the violin because that would be out of the way. And so this is why Lucia is asking me. So basically she is asking, she's saying, well, now that I can play piano, am I ready? And what will be the first piece? You know what? The first thing we actually play on the violin, unfortunately, we don't play songs on the violin. We just play open strings but it's still going to be fun. So I'm super proud of you, Lucia. And so we have one more great job. Keep it up. Hopefully, as soon as we can get together, you're definitely ready to start violin. And as soon as we can get together, we're going to start as soon as the quarantine is over and all that. We're definitely going to start some. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with open strings. Okay, and now we have the mom and daughter duet.
All right. Also, eventually, Twinkle Twinkle, probably.
Yeah, but not the first. But
not
she's
the
asking
first.
the first, and unfortunately, that
but
doesn't
the first
happen
song.
on the violin. Yeah.
Open strings aren't a song, though.
Well, you're right. I guess. Yeah, I guess if the very first song will probably be Twinkle Twinkle, but it will not be the first song that we'll actually play. Thank you, Estine. So here is now Martina also started learning piano along with Lucia, and so here they sent us a little duet.
Hi, Diana.
Hannah.
Any tips for how we can play better when we play together?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we are playing an arrangement of Pachelbel's Canon in D.
All right.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right.
By the way, all your educators,
1,
please
2,
tell me
3,
advice.
4. 2.
to all, I know we have a lot of educators who watch and a lot of students, so pitch in with advice. Esti, what would you recommend? First of all, great job, guys. Very, very good job.
Yeah, it was awesome. Super, super great, and reminds me of being a kid with my mom. Remember we used to play the Beethoven?
Yeah, we used to do that actually. Yes,
and you'd play the
the
melody.
Beethoven, the movie Beethoven. You know, the little da da dum da da dum, but their little theme song.
It's
Yeah.
fun. So it reminds me of that, which is really
Yes.
nice. I think so. You were asking how to play better together. I think you were mentioning. I'll let you mention your thing about the clapping, but for me, I think. Just really getting comfy with the rhythms and being able to like picking little chunks of music. So starting with just one part, because it's kind of a long piece, and you know you guys are doing great with it. But picking like one little section and really getting comfortable with it, making sure that when you hit the notes, you're hitting them together when they are lined up. So even looking at it vertically and seeing like, where do we line up exactly, and maybe circle those places or highlight those places so you know that those are the places where we need to all three hands hit the notes at once.
Yes, I think that's great. Yeah. So basically, I'm very impressed, Lucia, because you do have like several pitches, and the pitches are always correct. The time where it doesn't quite sound right is because they fall in the different place than they're supposed to. So one of the easy ways to do it, definitely divide it into chunks. And then I would ask Mom, Martina, to play. And for Lucia, instead of playing, if you could follow the music and then just say the pitch and then clap whenever it's time, like D, and really listen to the part that your mom is playing. And then, because I know you can hear the melody very well, so you probably know very well where the note is going, but sometimes looking at the keyboard and trying to find the note, it takes attention away from the rhythm. Yeah. It's been long. This is our longest live stream by far, but we just have, this is good, so we're almost done. So yeah, I think number one advice is instead of being concerned, like finding the notes out of the equation, so you don't have to worry about that, but instead of say the pitch and clap when it's time, right? So I think that would be very useful. Anybody has any advice, any comments for us?
No, but we have some comments from Catalina Ruiz. Hello.
Hi,
hello.
Catalina.
I replied to her earlier because I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You had a really good stream of thought going on with
Okay,
Laura, so I didn't
thank
want
you.
to. But I replied to her, and yeah, so that's pretty much it. And Adriana commented, she said parents definitely have to be very supportive, and it's really nice to see Martina not only being supportive but learning with her daughter. It's really important, and we're excited. We're so happy we could give you guys this opportunity, and I know Lucia was excited about getting dressed up because she saw our masterclass with Samuel Gaitan and saw that he wore a suit. So she was very excited. So Lucia, you look great in your princess dress.
Yes.
Really great.
And also just a little background on Lucia and Martina. Actually, the way we met is, I don't know how many of you, it was quite a few years ago that I had this project that was called Mozart, Mommy and Me. And I did concerts that were designed for families to come with kids. And we did, so with Martina, she liked the idea, and then I asked her to help me out, and we actually planned this really big event at Quinta Mazatlan outdoors, and we had like about 400 people show up from all over the valley, they drove from, and it was a wonderful event, and Lucia was a big part of planning, and actually her pictures were on the posters, along with my baby, who is now very tall, Danny. He was much younger back then, but that's how we met, actually, with Lucia and Martina, by planning this wonderful event. If you guys are interested in finding out more about Mozart, Mommy and Me, and if you happen to know of community of parents and children, obviously once we're over the quarantine, and if you think there's more desire to do events like that, please let us know in comments. We would love to plan something like that along the road once everything goes out in the open again. And the nice thing about that event, it's outdoors, and So it's actually very doable here in South Texas. Well, I think
that wraps it up for
yes,
today.
thank you
so much.
Thank you, Eleonora. Thank you to Nora's teacher for allowing us to do this. Thank you for Mr. Kabalevsky for writing the beautiful concerto. Thank you for... Thank you, Italy, for everything, for all the music and the arts and the language, and also, of course, Martina and Lucia. Thank you so much. So, guys, please, this is such a fun rubric. If you could, if you have any questions and you want to send us, you could just talk, or you could play and talk and show us violin, viola, cello, even piano, flute. I don't know, anything
really
that
anything.
has to do with music. It's so much fun to hear from you and to do these things like that live. Thank you so much for showing up. Don't forget that our next live stream is going to be this coming up Saturday. And I hope you show up. In the comments, we're going to put those things that you need to have with you. And have a wonderful, to those who are getting ready for spring break, yay, it's the first day. All the teachers have a great time. Thank you so much.